there's no greater way to kill a career trajectory than to stop learning or stop having that curiosity and desire to learn. Because if you think you have to figure it out all on your own, you're going to stifle your growth. You're going to miss an opportunity, one, to connect to somebody and really get to know them, but then also to learn from them, learn from their experience.
Welcome to the Made Leader Podcast, where exceptional leadership isn't about who you are, but who you choose to become. Join your host, Jen Arnold, for expert interviews, real-world stories, and practical advice that transforms managers into exceptional leaders. If you're a middle manager ready to unlock your potential, this is your podcast. Let's get started.
Hello, and welcome to the Made Leader Podcast. I'm your host, Jen Arnold. If you are listening to this in real time, then Happy New Year. Nothing is better than a blank slate for the year. And I am so thrilled with launching this podcast or relaunching. And I'm especially excited to introduce today's guest, Nicole Fallowfield. So Nicole is a real deal leader. And today she's going to talk about her promotion into a new role, which is Chief People Officer. I was introduced to Nicole about 5 or so years ago when she was Director of Wellbeing. She was seeing the kind of bigger picture of well-being, the broader employee experience, before it was as accepted as it is maybe now, maybe not. Let me tell you a little bit about Nicole. Nicole Fallowfield is a principal and the Chief People Officer at Gibson. Her focus is to create the best employee experience through a workplace culture that promotes an engaged, inclusive, and thriving workforce. Nicole joined Gibson in 2008 as the Director of Wellbeing, then served as the Director of Administration, where she had accountability for HR, IT, and facilities. Prior to joining Gibson, Nicole was the Vice President of Sales for Principal Wellness Company in Indianapolis. Now, in today's episode, we talk about what it's like to get promoted into a Chief People Officer role, really what set her up for the promotion. What does she think that she did to earn that spot? How she has really worked hard to build bridges across, within her department and across departments with her peers. Where she is really strong as a leader and, a little bit of a challenge for her that still comes in. And then she leaves us with advice for people maybe wanting to get a promotion. That's something that maybe if you have on your radar, Nicole gives you some advice. I hope you enjoy this interview with Nicole Fallowfield. Thank you so much for listening to the Made Leader Podcast. Nicole, welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad to have you on today.
Thanks, Jen. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I like to start the podcast with a fun fact about yourself, but I'm going to ask it in a different way. So for people who really know you, they would know that. If you could fill in the blank.
That I have one speed, and it's 100 miles an hour all the time. And maybe something that's a little more of a fun fact is that I competed in a couple of bodybuilding competitions, one when I was in college, and it was my senior year, and then one soon after I graduated.
You need to send me a picture. That is amazing. Such commitment. I knew bodybuilders in college, and it's such a commitment.
It is such a commitment. And I think it's more, everybody used to always ask me like, well, what are you eating? And that was extremely important, the eating and the exercise. But when it got down to it, it was so much more mental than anything. It was this mental game. You kind of played with yourself and required a lot of grit for sure.
I'm sure for people who don't know you, they are picturing you right now as like a super pumped up little lady. But, you look like a regular person, just for the audience. Well, Nicole, you recently entered the role of Chief People Officer, and you've been promoted, and it was a newly created position. So tell me a little bit about the first 3 to 4 months in your new role and what it entails.
So I would say in the first 3 to 4 months, it's really been more of a shift in focus for me. So in my prior role as director of administration, I had accountability for our HR team and really anything that touched the employee experience from an HR perspective as well as IT and facilities. So the director of administration had accountability for all three of those areas. And now with the chief people officer role, it's more of that intense focus and putting all of my energy toward that people experience, which from my perspective really starts from the candidate experience and maybe even before then with how does Gibson present itself as a brand, our brand awareness. Are we welcoming? Are we able to tell our story of our employee experience through our online presence? So there's been really more of just this intense focus on the overall people strategy, as well as making sure that we're executing on what we want our people experience to be.
Yes, there's a lot to it. And I think people don't realize. I think it does, the brand starts even before someone becomes a candidate, right? What they perceive it as an employment opportunity or, the Gibson brand. And that is a lot. There are a lot of little touches involved in there. So it is all encompassing. And, you were a director before then. And what do you attribute to the promotion? Because there may be people listening that go, yeah, that's my end goal, right? I want to be a chief people officer. But, you don't always know what contributes to your promotion. But what do you think that you did to set you up for this role?
Well, I think one, earning the confidence and trust of my peers on the leadership team was super important. Being willing to step outside of my comfort zone and grow and learn. I think there's no greater way to kill a career trajectory than to stop learning or stop having that curiosity and desire to learn. I remember hearing, and he still says this quite often. Our CEO will say, you're growing and you're learning if you're uncomfortable. And so I used to joke with him and our COO that I'm uncomfortable every day. So apparently I'm learning every day. So I just think being able to, be open-minded, being trustworthy, showing that you're willing to roll up your sleeves and do the tough work and make the tough decisions that need to be made. In my prior role as director of administration, we had a lot of work to do, not only in HR from a process standpoint with our recruiting, our onboarding, our learning and development, offboarding. There were a lot of pieces that needed some creation and needed some fine tuning. And I think that I was able to get those things in a really great place with the team I surrounded myself with. It's never a solo effort. And so I think the opportunity I had to step into this chief people officer role was not only a reflection of my work, but just the great collaboration of teammates around me. And so I give them a lot of credit as well.
Yeah, and I wanted to dig in that too a little bit because I don't think people always see how important it is to build those bridges across, like to your peers. They just think of it as, oh, the CEO is going to see me and they are going to promote me. But the peer relationship is important. Was there anything specifically you did, like when you to partner or to collaborate? And I know sometimes this comes naturally to certain people. You're just naturally collaborative, so you may not even think about it. But for people listening, I think it's important to point that out. And if there's any advice you have around kind of becoming friendly with your peers.
Yeah, so I think including different people's perspectives, especially when you're thinking a role like mine, where it touches the entire organization, right? So you want to, if you're making a change, you want to have buy-in on that change. You don't want to make that change in a silo. You need to have support for it. But also, even when you're just tweaking a process, making sure like, this is what I think makes sense, but does it make sense to you? Or does it make sense to the person who's actually executing it? And so just being open to feedback, presenting ideas, having listening sessions with other people for what's important to them. And that's a lot of what I did initially was finding out what were the pain points for our hiring manager. I knew as a hiring manager myself, what I was struggling with. So, but hearing from other people, what were their struggles? How could we as an HR team make their lives better, make the candidate experience better, make the new employee experience better, but then also how are we investing and paying attention to our people who've been here for a while so that we're continually to reinvest in our top talent and making sure people have growth opportunities. So listening to them really helped to lay the foundation. And again, because I had worked with many of them in different capacities over many years, they knew that I was open, that what you see is what you get with Nicole, and that I also know that I don't always have to be right. So sometimes an idea I might have may not be the best course of action. So just being open to that and also taking the time to thank people for their time and their input. I think that's really important too when you're collaborating and trying to revise things that impact the entire employee experience.
Yeah, that's so important because I could see a lot of people going, well, I know what the pain points are, right? I was a hiring manager, but you're like, yeah, it could be different, right? For someone else or someone in a different department. So it is, yeah, getting perspectives. So thank you for that. I know you've only been in the role for a few months, but you've already seen, the perspective of a chief people officer. And how is that different from a director level role?
So in my director level role, it was very broad, right? So the employee experience was still at the heart of it, but it not only encompassed the HR function that touches employee experience, but also facilities, how that impacts employee experience, technology, how that also has an impact on our employees and their ability to, work and get things done. In the chief people officer role, I think anytime you put that C title in there, it elevates it and draws attention. And then you add people. So in this role, it is intensely focused on our people, the people experience we're trying to create at Gibson, how we want to be known for our people experience. I mean, that's the business we're in, right? We are not selling product, we're selling our people a service. And so there's more of a focus on that, and it is a higher level strategic role. I do feel that and feel that the magnitude of the role. I am the first chief people officer at Gibson. So I don't take that responsibility lightly. It's very humbling as well. But I also have recognized that our team feels the importance of it. So not just at the leadership team level, but even my colleagues. I had more outreaches from our female employees when the announcement was made with kudos and a pat on the back and feeling like, wow, we're being seen through your promotion. And I was surprised by that. I thought it was really cool, but it just adds to that sense of responsibility and accountability I know I have to our fellow employee owners at Gibson to make sure that we are staying at the forefront of delivering on what we want our people experience to be.
I love that people, especially women, would say, hey, we love that you got promoted. Thank you. And as we talked about this before we started recording, it's actions, right? How do companies have actions that support things like having women in the C-suite? And I think it's too, just an aside, I've never thought to email someone congratulations that got promoted to that level. So I just love that for your company that I think it shows a lot about you too, that they feel comfortable going, hey, great job. We're happy to see you there. And that's just exciting to hear. And so, Nicole, how would you describe your leadership style? You've talked about you're collaborative, you're open, what you see is what you get. But how many people do you lead right now?
Right now, I have three people who report directly to me: our HR manager, our learning and development manager, and then our internal recruiter. And I think her formal title is talent connection manager. So the three of them who are part of the HR team.
So how do you think they would describe your leadership style?
I think they would describe me as being more of a coach, probably. where I believe very strongly in autonomy. I value that myself. I've always loved being in roles where there might be some guardrails, but I still had the freedom to do things, my way. Didn't have to be completely prescriptive. And so I lead that way as well, where I'm here if you need me. I'm here to coach you. But I also am not going to stand in your way. So if you have an idea and want to run with something, I think our talent connection manager is really great at that. She has a lot of ideas, and she's doing the recruiting function better than I could have ever done it. And I was sitting in that seat for a little bit when I was in my director role, along with my learning and development manager. And she and I are both so grateful now that Santana sits in that seat, because we had ideas, but we didn't have the capacity to execute on them. And now here comes Santana, and she's got all of the ideas and the capacity to execute on them. So I
Love
think
that energy.
Yeah, I think they would say that I'm available, I'm open, I'm always here if they need me, but I'm not a micromanager. I don't lead in an authoritarian way by any stretch.
Has your leadership style changed over the years?
I don't know if it's more style versus comfort in myself. I think my younger leadership self, even prior to when I joined Gibson, I always felt like I had to know the answer. I had to solve the problem. And now I know that's not true. And in fact, you can be holding people back by having to be the one who always has the answer and solves the issue, versus being an active listener and posing questions for, well, how do you think what do you think the answer is to this issue? And so I didn't always do that as a younger leader. I do that a lot more now. I will say that sometimes I still have trouble delegating certain things, but I'm getting better at it. And my team knows that they can call me on it if I'm holding on to something I shouldn't be holding on to. They do not hesitate to call me out.
Well, let's dig into that, because I know you're a great leader. We're going to get back to your strengths in a minute. But I think it is really important, because all leaders struggle with something, right? And struggle may be a strong word, but challenged by, and it sounds like delegation is one of them. So what do you feel like stands in your way sometimes? I know you're working on it, and you've told your team, hey, call me out. But what are some thoughts maybe that go through your head when you're like, oh, I'll just do it?
I think sometimes I don't want them to feel like I'm not willing to do it, like, oh, I can just do this quickly. Sometimes it's a time thing, and thinking, oh, well, then this is going to be an email, and, versus I'll just do it myself and be done with it. I do think that in this new role, it has necessitated that I am more open to that delegation and spending my time in my highest and best use of my energy. And same thing for all of them too. And we went through an exercise recently where we looked at what are our different accountabilities, so that we make sure that we're aligning around those things and our energy is directed where we feel like we're really good. And everybody has, tasks that are, maybe things that they don't enjoy, but hopefully the majority of what we're doing in our careers and work lives are things that we have energy and passion for, versus feeling like it's a big weight that needs to be carried.
Right. Right. Has your team called you on it yet about delegation? But like, no, Nicole, I got it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. Like, no, you should not be doing that. Okay. Thank you. You're right. I shouldn't be doing that.
I love that trusted relationship, right? Where you're giving them permission, and when they do call you on it. And I think it's always recommend that leaders like talk about what's a challenge for them, right? Like, here's why it's a challenge for me. I would need you to call me out, and I won't be mad, but it's just that accountability piece, because you can't be good at everything. I'm sorry, Nicole, you just can't.
I know. And those perfectionist tendencies, they kind of creep in every once in a while. And
How so? Tell me
well,
more.
I think wanting to, I get hung up on writing LinkedIn posts. So that is one thing that I'm trying to focus more on, is being more active on LinkedIn to really tell our story. I think Gibson has a phenomenal story to tell around what a great place we are to work. We're 100% employee owned, which is unique. There are so many great things about our culture. And so I want to be more active on LinkedIn and telling that story, but I will get hung up on writing and rewriting something. Now, ChatGPT has helped me, and my team has helped me, because we actually created a scorecard metric for myself and one of my other teammates who also wants to be more active. And so we have a scorecard every week in our meeting. And if I have to put a big 0 in there, I'm like, oh, hey, I've got to do this. I need to stop trying to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect.
It's hard, I think, especially when you get started, because you're like, oh, I don't know what the reaction is. And, there are sometimes I will painstakingly put a post up and it gets nothing. And then sometimes I just completely half-ass it. I was like, oh, well, I've got to try. You just never know. But it is that just getting something out there, right? And not making it complicated. But I think it's just that practice. And it is hard. And thank you for admitting that, because I don't think you're alone. And I think that's why the majority of people don't post on LinkedIn. But if you're listening, everyone go like Nicole's post. All right. We're going to make sure we like them.
When I get one out there, I'm probably about 4 weeks behind. So
just one a week. Just one a week. That's all you need to do. We don't want that scorecard to be 0 for you. On the flip side, so you talked about delegation and perfectionism that kind of can creep in. But what do you feel like comes naturally for you? Is it that piece like giving your team autonomy? Is it like, what do you feel like you're like, oh, this is just kind of easy?
I think, yes, that does come easy, but I also think some of the hard people conversations that we have to have comes naturally to me, even though that sounds a little odd to say. When our team leads have somebody that maybe isn't, really thriving in their role, I feel like I have a natural ability to give them perspective just by hearing them, talking through it. I always feel like when we have to have those tough conversations, that we need to do it in a spirit of being kind to the employee who's struggling. And I don't think it represents our core values to not have the conversation because it makes us feel bad, or it might make them feel bad. And so I think that's probably one of my biggest strengths. And I think that's one of the things probably our team leads appreciate about working with me the most, is that I can help them navigate that in a way that doesn't have to feel so defeating to them or defeating to the other person. And the reality is, we have not a lot, but when we have people who maybe are struggling and we put them on a performance plan, many of them come out of it and they're still here today. When we have situations where we have to have conversations about parting ways, I always feel confident and secure in those discussions, because I know deep down we are doing what's in the best interest of not only the business, but the individual. And so I've never walked away from one of those conversations feeling like that wasn't the best decision at the time for Gibson or for the individual. And so I think that's something that comes naturally to me, is, I don't know, easy, if you will, but I think it's just because I feel like it's the right thing to do.
It is. And I think I love that you have that skill, because I'd say the majority of people don't, right? It is a great skill to have, especially as a leader, and because it's necessary. But I think that's what gets lost, is you're doing it for them, right? Because they don't want to show up doing a bad job. They want to do their best. And if they don't know that they're not performing up to standards, they can't change it. So everyone just ends up getting frustrated. Right. So it's reframing that from the get-go, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yes. So, I want to ask this question for our wellness people,
Okay.
right? So both of us have a wellness background and we're both doing different things now. In a sense, right? I mean, I'd say it's integrated into what we do. I mean, chief people officers definitely, there's a piece of that in there. But wellness people tend to put themselves in a box, or people put them in a box, right? That's all they can do. So, what would you say about your career trajectory from, where you started to where you are now?
Well, I think you're right. I think a lot of people with wellness backgrounds, or even if they're in the wellness space right now, they either put themselves in a box or other people put them there. But there is so much depth to truly having an understanding of overall well-being. It's not just physical health. And I think so many people equate wellness with physical health. And so I would say, when I started, that's kind of what I was doing. I was doing health screenings, talking to people about their health screening results, um,
Same.
did some health coaching. I think one of the things that really changed for me and helped to give me this broader perspective was I had my second baby. I wanted to get another coaching certification. I decided to do intrinsic coaching, and that started to open my mind into this new way of thinking like, oh, this was why many, many years ago when I was a health coach, I was frustrated as a health coach was because I was trying to do the work versus letting the individual do the work. So it started there. And then when I got connected with Rosie Ward and John Robeson from Salveo Partners, and they launched their very first Thriving Workplace Culture certification program, that completely changed how I viewed everything. And I think for wellness professionals out there, think about all you're doing. You're impacting more than just physical health. Most likely, no matter what role you're in, you're probably talking to people about their financial well-being to a degree. You're probably talking to them about their career well-being. So there are so many things that impact that. And then I think for me, when I went through that training program with John and Rosie and really started to see things differently, I started consulting with our clients differently on organizational health and really started focusing more on that, more on what are you doing with your leaders? Are you a great place to work? Because the data shows that that probably has a bigger impact on somebody's overall health than your biometric screening that you're offering. And so that just naturally there is a natural connection to organizational health when you have a background in wellness and well-being. And I think, as I shared with you at the beginning of the podcast before we started recording, that's what our CEO, when he approached me about taking on our director of administration role, that's what he told me. Like, this role is about culture. You get culture with all the work you've done, with all of the coaching you've done. And I think you've been training for this role, Nicole, your whole life, even if you don't think this is it. And then he was right. I took on that director role, loved it. And then now here I am as chief people officer.
Yes. I mean, careers have just a wobbly path, right? You never know where you're going to end up, but there are so many possibilities out there. So I'm glad that you can show that as an example. So, Nicole, thinking about the new leader maybe listening, what advice would you give your younger manager self, maybe in that first year of leadership when you were shiny and new? What advice would you give that person?
One, don't feel like you have to know everything. It's okay to say, I don't know. Let me look into that. Don't be afraid to learn from others, your peers, even if they're younger than you, older than you. I mean, I learned so much from so many people in our organization. There are a couple of people on my team who are a good 15 to 20 years younger than me, and they teach me stuff all the time. I have peers on the leadership team who are my age. I learned from them. I are director of technology was maybe a little bit older than me. I'm not sure how much older. I think he looks very young, but I know he jokes with me that he's, a decade, almost a decade older than me, but I learned from him as well. So I think don't be afraid to say you don't know and be open to learning from others, because if you think you have to figure it out all on your own, you're going to stifle your growth. You're going to miss an opportunity, one, to connect to somebody and really get to know them, but then also to learn from them, learn from their experience, and let them
Yes.
contribute.
Yes, absolutely. We can learn so much. And I tell you, my 11-year-old, he's the only one. Like if I wouldn't know anything about music, current music, he helps me. So younger, older, same. We can all learn from each other. I think that's great advice. Now I'm going to ask you for one more piece of advice. So there are many people that do want maybe a chief seat or even want to become a director from a manager. They want a promotion. They want to move up on the ladder. And what advice would you give to leaders who are seeking a promotion?
I would say my first piece of advice would be honest with yourself about why you want it. Make sure you know why you want it. And make sure you understand what that means. What does that promotion mean for my work life balance? I don't know that is accurate. My work life integration, let's say. What does that look like? Be honest with yourself about what skills you need. I mean, there are skills that I know I still need to develop, even though I have the title. I have a list, right? So, just making sure you're being honest about, where are your skill gaps? What do you need in order to bridge those gaps? And then find resources to be able to help yourself to learn and grow and show that you're willing to work for it. And then ask. If you don't ask, then you may not ever have the opportunity. So ask your current manager, what do I need to do to get on a career path to become, whatever the title might be? And what skills do I need?
I think those are great, great pieces of advice. And Nicole, you got me curious, and you don't have to answer this, but you said you have a list of skills that you want to develop. Any insight?
Okay, so I suck at Excel.
Oh, Excel. Oh, that's on your list.
A little bit on my list. Thankfully, my role doesn't require a ton of that, but I want to get a little bit better at that. I have a list of what does our overall people strategy look like, and so there are some areas that I know I need to get a little deeper on, as far as some of the legal things that are coming down with pay transparency, and making sure I fully understand that and what that means when we're growing in different markets and posting, for different roles, making sure that I'm ahead of that. So that's kind of on my list, just knowing that I don't have a formal HR compliance background. There are some things that I'm wanting to do as well, just from looking at how do we package isn't the right word, but I'm going to use that for lack of a better term. But how do we package all of the great benefits we offer, not only to articulate that to our current employees, but to prospective employees in a way that's engaging and meaningful? Because right now, like many organizations, I mean, we have we've got this great benefit guide that we give people during open enrollment, and we have all of these other benefits, but they live in all these different places. And so how can I leverage our overall team and bring something to bear that is more meaningful and impactful to our current employees and then prospective employees as well? So that's kind of on my list of things that I want to dive deeper into. That's not necessarily at the top of my current skill set, if you will.
Yeah, you're doing that because you have this need to grow and learn. So I think that's even a great piece of advice, is everyone have these things that you're continuously working on. I think that's wonderful. So thank you for sharing. Well, Nicole, where can people find out more about you?
So I'm on LinkedIn. So if you go on LinkedIn, you'll find me there. I'm not really on much other social media. You can find me on the Gibson website, which is thegibsonedge.com. So I'm there. But yeah, LinkedIn's probably the best way. That's where most people reach out to me. And I've met a lot of really great new people, people doing leadership training, just people who wanted to connect since I got promoted. And that's been really fun. So yeah, just feel free to message me and connect on LinkedIn.
We will, and we're going to watch you to make sure you post.
Oh, I know. I have extra pressure. I just put that out there for the world.
I know. Accountability. Yes, I will link that up in the show notes. But Nicole, are there any additional thoughts or comments you want to leave the listeners with before we close out?
I think the only thing I would say is, believe in yourself, have a plan, and be open. Be open to learning from others and being uncomfortable, because I think a lot of my career has been, I'm learning something. So it can be uncomfortable, but then you have a new skill or you meet new people, you do something outside your comfort zone and you grow as a person. And I think you can't underestimate the value of that.
Not at all. Well, Nicole, thank you so much for your time and the conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jen.